Pensacola Perry on the line from Florida. How are you today, Perry?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I introduced you as being a Florida resident, but you grew up in the Northeast. That's correct, right?
Yep, sure did.
Yeah, and so you've been living down in Florida for must be over 20 years now, right?
Yeah, actually, Rudy, I've lived here now for more than half my life.
Oh, outstanding. So I want to get right into living in the free state of Florida. So, while the whole country was going through lockdownerism, what was it like living in Florida during when we were all locked down? What was life like down there as far as people wearing masks, access to stores, and other things? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, actually, it's quite interesting. Obviously, the first 2 weeks, everything except necessities, which, by the way, included alcohol and cigarettes, go figure, um, with the exception of gasoline, cigarettes, alcohol, groceries, everything had been shut down, just like um, Fauci made happen throughout the rest of the country. And so within the first 2 weeks, Governor DeSantis started gathering data that was being provided by everyone from the federal government to his statewide um, Surgeon General. And they very quickly saw that, number one, the masks really didn't seem to make any difference. Number two, that the groups of people who were suffering the most from contracting the virus were one of just a few simple groups. They were the elderly, which made up more than 95% of all the cases in the state of Florida. They were those with comorbidities. And then there were those who lived a reckless lifestyle, many of which were homeless. And when all of this data started being collected after 2 weeks, he started questioning, do we really need to keep the state shut down? I'm assuming he was also on the phone with Governor Kemp, who moved to actually open the state of Georgia days before Florida was reopened. And obviously he was on the phone with Governor Abbott out in Texas as well. Certainly Governor Nome up in, I think it's South Dakota or North Dakota. Anyway, within 3 weeks, he started lifting the chains off of our backs. And
And how did that affect?
restaurants,
How did that affect you directly when things started to open up? How did that affect you directly?
well, first of all, it was possible to no longer suffer cabin fever after 2 weeks, which was nice. But it allowed people in the state of Florida to ease back into life pre-COVID. And every week there was a reduction. So now keep in mind, we're talking about the month of March here and the first week of April when the chains started coming off. And gradually things reopened. Within 4 weeks, the restaurants and bars were able to reopen, but you had to wear masks. You had to keep your distance. They were operating at 50% or less capacity. And again, all of this took place. The stores were able to reopen. You couldn't even get your car repaired for the first 3-4 weeks. Okay. Gradually, all the stores were able to reopen. After 2 or 3 months, he finally said, we're reopening our schools in August. Florida starts K through 12 in the second week, for the most part, in the second week of August. And he announced at the end of July, we are going to reopen our schools. We are going to allow the individual counties and boards of education to decide how they want to go about the learning process, such as offering for those who fear sending their children back into the classroom, you're going to continue to be able to do online education. Those who have no concerns or very few concerns, the schools will be open. And what we started seeing down here in the state of Florida is exactly what the data was telling the governor. People weren't getting sick. It was just those few groups. And that's when, of course, the media tried to go after him. And fortunately, Governor DeSantis, being a Navy SEAL, said, I don't care what you say. I see the data. My people are doing fine. We have all of these systems in place so people can get tested and blah, 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 blah. And so very, very quickly, for me anyway, I consider it very quickly, within 2 months, things started to go back to normal. The beaches were reopened so people could enjoy the summer. And one by one, the restrictions over the course of 6-7 months came down to finally there were no more mask restrictions. And again, that was based on county.
Yeah.
The state removed the mandate and said it's up to the county.
So your beloved governor, Ron DeSantis, so there is talk about him running for president in 2024. As a Florida resident, Perry, what do you think about all this talk about him running for president in 2024 and how you feel about Trump running and whether this is going to be a divisive issue? You want to see your governor enter the race or no?
I do. But not for the reasons you think, not exclusive to the fact I want to see him become president. He's going to be term limited. So he's going to be in the second year of his second term. And we all know what it means to be a lame duck. I honestly believe he chose the right person to be his running mate. Our lieutenant governor, she's cut from the same cloth. She is feisty. And I think having served under him for 6 years is preparing her to step into the role of governor, which will allow her to be governor for 10 years if she is in fact as successful as Governor DeSantis.
Are you? Do you consider yourself a Trump fan?
Oh, I am absolutely a Trumpian, no question.
So why do you think Ron DeSantis should enter the race then, if it's going to kind of divide, or kind of end up in a primary? Wouldn't the Democrats just love that, to see Ron DeSantis pitted against Trump?
Well, as the saying goes, be careful for you may get it. I see the competition between these two is healthy. I also believe that life would much weaker as he's continuing to be in the primary now, rather than be president. I think, as I did in 2016, I was convinced he did not want to be president. He chose to run for president because he didn't like what he saw in the Republican Party. All these gentlemen gems, the people like McConnell, the people like Boehner, who is now gone, the people like Romney, who is now serving in the Senate. He didn't want that. He wanted someone who was going to carry the mantle of Reagan. And there's only going to be one Reagan, just like there's only going to be one Trump. I honestly believe that he ran hoping someone would pick up the ball from what he was saying and run with it. Closest to him was Ted Cruz. Even Cruz disappointed him, and that's why he decided to stay with it. He got out in front. He was number one from the moment he announced until the moment he won presidency, and that's the kind of guy he is. He's a born leader, I think sees all those traits in DeSantis. But let's see. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah. So
He's going to need another two.
You think a primary would be healthy for the ticket or the Republican ticket?
Oh, absolutely. Of course it's going to be healthy.
Yeah.
Competition is what the cream always rises to the top. And I honestly believe, even though this nomination is Trump's to take, he's going to have to earn it, just like he earned it 6 years ago. And he's going to need a number two. And although Mike Pence greatly disappointed me in the closing days of the first Trump administration, he was a very loyal and he was a very competent vice president. Most people don't know all the things that Mike Pence accomplished behind the scenes and did so based on the requests made upon him by Trump. Well, Ron DeSantis is exactly that kind of man. And that's what Trump is going to need to be effective. Because if you think for 1 second, God willing, Trump becomes president for the second time, if you think for 1 second, the Romneys and the Collins and the other Gentleman Jim and Country Club Republicans are going to just sit by and let him do what he wants to do, you got another thing coming. Yeah. We're going to have a lot more Trumpians in both the House and Senate.
Do you think there could be a Trump DeSantis ticket?
That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah. Ultimately, that's what I'm hoping for.
I want to switch gears really quick here, and I know we talked about that you were a Messianic Jew, and we talked a little bit about that during your introduction. I want to delve a little bit more into that just for a minute. So I consider myself a Christian because I believe Jesus was the Messiah. And I want to kind of understand a little bit deeper what Messianic Jew, what he feels about Jesus as being the Christ or the Messiah, whether you believe Jesus is the Messiah or the Christ. As my belief is that Jesus was a man and not God, although he might have been the Son of God, and I think we agree on this issue that we're all sons of God. But I think if we were to measure righteousness or divination, divinity, if man can be divine, that Jesus was the most divine of men. Where do you stand on that, or where is Messianic Judaism as a whole kind of stand on that issue?
Well, everything you just described about the Messiah is spot on with the thinking of, and I'm using air quotes here, true Messianic Judaism. What separates Yeshua, and that's his Hebraic name, mm-hmm. from the rest of us is, as you just described, righteousness. And it is so comfortable for me as a Jewish man to talk about this, because as the Jewish Testament told us, the Messiah would come to deliver us. We are already in the promised land, but to deliver us to God. And we would reject him. And as a result, the Jewish people throughout time immemorial have suffered greatly because we turned our backs on the Messiah. As a Messianic Jew, I read both the Jewish and the Christian Testaments. Notice something no traditional Jew nor Christian understands. What is the difference between calling him the old and new versus the Jewish versus Christian? Well, the difference between using those terminologies, starting with the first Pope, Constantine, he is what separated the followers of Yeshua, who were trying to lead us in his footsteps, from the rest of Judaism. And Constantine, as most people know, was a pagan who came to Christianity. Why? Mm-hmm. He came to Christianity because he saw it as a threat. So if he could adopt it into paganism or bring paganism into some of the traits of paganism into what was now being called Christianity, we don't have to worry about those Jews. The Old Testament no longer matters. We have the New Testament. Well, if you read both the Jewish and the Christian Testaments from the New American Study Bible, which is the closest the Messiah came, he was rejected. As a result, the Jewish people have been persecuted for the past 2,000 years.
Yeah.
He told us, in his own words, I did not come to replace the law being the 613 mitzvot. Most people know the mitzvot as the 10 Commandments.
Right.
As I said to you in our first conversation, Rudy, the 10 big ones, okay? Everybody, Christian, Jew alike, we live by those 10 big commandments. But there are a total of 613. And all of that has to do with the lesser important things, but they're still important.
Right.
Things like how to prepare food,
Right.
why it's important for the young male to be circumcised. Well,
Right.
modern medicine has proved it's much more healthy for a man to be circumcised than to be uncircumcised.
Right.
And so all these things make up part of the 613 mitzvot. Anyway, getting back to my point. So being brought back into the fold by a Messianic rabbi who said, you don't have to turn your back on Judaism in order to reach for and love the Messiah. All he wanted us to do is what our Father in heaven, Hashem, has commanded us to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he came to earth. He came to fulfill the law, not replace it.
Right.
The moment I knew that, I came back to faith with an open heart, and my whole life changed. And so that, in a nutshell, is the difference between a traditional Jew who is observant. I'm not talking about the reformists who think it's okay for a woman to be a rabbi. There's a reason why only men, just like Catholic priests, are rabbis. And so the moment that happened to me, my life took on a more important meaning. And so that's what Messianic Jewry is. It doesn't mean I'm a Christian who wears a Star of David with a cross in it. I don't wear a cross. I wear a Star of David.
Right.
And, but I am at such peace because now I can truly embrace my Christian brothers and sisters, and they love me because they know I've brought the Messiah into my heart and into my life.
Right, with a greater understanding for each other. That's cool insight, and it intrigues me so much. I just want to turn back to politics before we end here, just for the last couple minutes. So you're like the longest. You've been a Republican the longest out of all the people I know, and you've been steadfast conservatives. And when I was on the left, we did have some intense debates, great political debates. And what drew you to conservatism? I know you said you're a Reagan Republican, but just to reiterate one more time, what is conservatism to you? What is republicanism? And just in the last 2 minutes, what put you on the political map where you are or have been for some time now?
I'll give you that answer, but I want to quickly answer something you just stated. You were on the left, but you were what I considered an honest liberal, not a Bolshevik.
Right.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Okay? Because you and I could have real debates about the differences we saw in politics, yet we were still friends at the end of the day.
Yep.
You can't do that with today's left.
Yeah.
So understand there's a difference.
Hardcore.
Getting back
they're extreme. They're extreme. It's now they point to the right and say extremist when they're the actual extremists. So.
Right. Well, the more they try to project their image onto us, the more they try to sully the waters.
Yeah.
But getting back to your question, first I have to tell you that I was the youngest of two sons. My brother is 12 years older than me, and as I mentioned in our first conversation, He was the last of his high school class in 1967 to continue to wear his hair cut above the ears. So you have to remember what that time was like in the late 1960s.
Right.
He voted for Nixon in 68. And in 72, when I started becoming aware as an 11-year-old what politics was about, he spoke to me about that and why it was important to be not just an American, but a patriotic American because of all the things that have been given to us. That stuck with me all the way through high school. And I learned more and more about politics and became more vocal. Matter of fact, I was the vice president of my high school class, and one of the reasons why was based on my beliefs of politics. Moving forward, at the time of the 1980 election, I literally was 19 years old, and I walked into the school that housed the voting booths in my district, not knowing who I was going to vote for. And I had to think about it. Why is that? Because the media had convinced me that Ronald Reagan was an old man with old ideas that don't work anymore. I had to think long and hard. Did I want to vote for John Anderson, who was nothing but a spoiler, which meant I was really voting for Mr. Peanut to be a failed president for 2 terms? Or do I vote for this old man with old ideas? And I decided there has to be a change in course for the country. There has to be a better way. I'm going to take a chance and vote for this old man. And by 1984, I was screaming Ronald Reagan's name from the rooftops.
Right.
I was no longer a victim of society. I was an American. I was a proud American. And I knew I was the master of my own destiny. My success or failure was not due to someone not liking me because I was Jewish or I was overweight or whatever the case may be. It was because I failed myself. And that's what Ronald Reagan taught me. Hence why I call myself a Reagan Republican.
So what is, how would you term, what is conservatism? What is a conservative? And I want to kind of stay away from the common traditionalist ideals that have been lumped in with conservatism, because in my view, conservatism is an economic conservative versus maybe a traditionalist who believe in traditionalist views. What do you think a conservatism, and what do you think a conservative is today?
Well, I think a modern conservative can be both of what you described. Doesn't have to be. They can be independent of one another. I happen to be one of those that thinks of both. Conservatively, when it comes to political stance, I'm more of a traditionalist. I've come to that point. I wasn't like that when I was in my teens and 20s, but I have gradually moved to that point. Just like you've moved from the left, your rudder now is pretty much to the middle, maybe leans just a little to the right. But look how far you've come. Well, so did I. I just didn't come as far from the left as you did. When it comes to fiscal matters, I believe in limited government. I don't think we can ever get back to the type of limited government we had before President Wilson. There's not enough time today for us to get into that conversation, but for those who are willing to go back and read about the Wilson administration, that's where things started to go off the rails. We're talking about more than 100 years ago now. And what he did was he tried to not just further federalize our lives, he tried to nationalize them. FDR, 25 years later, took it to the next step. And so Ronald Reagan wanted to go in the opposite direction. He wanted to get us closer to Harding, let's say,
right.
Okay? And he had great success, but even Ronald Reagan was not able to overcome the huge bureaucracy that is the federal government today. That is something that Trump, even with no support from the Republican Party, was able to make some headway on. And I believe if he has another 2 terms, notice I said 2, not 1. That's a conversation for another day. If he has another 2 terms, imagine what the possibilities, not only for our country, but for the free world could be.
Yeah. I agree with you there. I'm gonna have to cut it short now, Perry. Pensacola Perry, folks, resident of Florida, longtime conservative, good friend of mine. We'll talk soon. Thanks for joining us, Perry.
Thank you.
All right. See you.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was really cool. That was a lot of great insight into conservatism, politics in general, especially how Floridians and specifically Perry feels about the governor entering the 2024 presidential race, and some other interesting stuff going on with religion. And we're going to pick up that conversation next week. So that's it for me. And we will see you tomorrow.